folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen. This week we are continuing the franchise frenzy with the part 2's of the 25 franchises that I picked for this. And this was created by TheHorrorMan and Horrific Nightmares JM. So let's get started, shall we? A lot of great part 2's to talk about. And starting at the bottom once again is the Leprechaun franchise with Leprechaun 2. Now, I do still enjoy this film, although a lot of people give this one crap. Not that people give such great praise to any film in this franchise, but people seem to especially hate on Part 2 for some reason. Next up, we have Puppet Master 2. Really fun entry in the franchise, and this is where they introduced the Torch character. Really cool, one of my favorite puppets in the series. Next up we have The Conjuring 2. Very solid follow-up to the original, though I don't think it's quite as scary as the original, but a solid follow-up nonetheless. Next up, we have Child's Play 2. As I said before, I'm not the biggest Chucky fan in the world, but definitely enjoy the franchise, and I do enjoy Part 2. I think it's definitely the best sequel in the series. Definitely really enjoy the final act that takes place in the toy store. That's really fun. Next up, we have Resident Evil Apocalypse. Definitely enjoy this one quite a bit. It's definitely one of my favorite in the series. Really amps up the action big time. I love how they portray the Nemesis character. He's just awesome. He's almost like the Terminator, just completely unstoppable and relentless. And I love the fight scenes he has with Alice, man. They just really go at it. I love seeing Alice run down the side of a skyscraper. It's just insane. Next up, we have Scream 2. Another really solid entry in the franchise. Just a great follow-up. It's not one that I really revisit too often, but I like especially what they did with the Cotton Weary character, making him more prevalent in this film. I really like Liev Schreiber. And yeah, I love the reveal at the end of the killer, or killers. Great job by Wes Craven once again. Next up is Saw 2. Oh yes, there will be blood. And this is actually my favorite entry in the Saw series. You really get to know Jigsaw and his backstory and what he's all about. And I like seeing him a lot more in this film. And I love his interaction with Detective Matthews, played by Donnie Wahlberg. And they just have a great chemistry. Great rivalry going. And yeah, such a fun movie, and got some awesome traps in here for sure. Next up, we have a movie that just doesn't get enough love, I feel, and that's Jaws 2. I will agree with the Horror Man when he said this is like a slasher movie with a shark. It definitely is. Where the shark picks people off one by one. Great to see Roy Scheider coming back as Chief Brody. He does a great job once again. Just a really fun sequel. Definitely solid. It's got my favorite tagline of all time. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. Next up, we have Sleepaway Camp 2, Unhappy Campers. I mean, this movie's an absolute blast. I love it. And I really enjoy Pamela Springsteen's take on the Angela character. How she just punishes all the bad campers, the ones that are doing bad things and having sex and doing drugs, and I love when she does the scene where she's using the acoustic guitar, singing the Happy Camper song. Man, it's just so much fun. And they make fun of, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series and then the Elm Street series, It's just so much fun. It's an absolute blast. It also has some great kills, too, especially that outhouse scene. Oh, man, that is so nasty. Next up, we have A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Definitely a film that I feel deserves a lot more love, and it has kind of grown a cult following over the years. But I will say this is the best version of Freddy, I think, in the entire series. He is so menacing, so sinister, so scary. Very dark version of Freddy. And yeah, I like how they changed the story up a little bit, where here Freddy actually possesses someone instead of just people seeing them in their dreams. Here he actually possesses a person and makes them do his bidding, kill for me. Next up, we have the Hammer Frankenstein series being represented, and that is with Revenge of Frankenstein. This definitely isn't one of my favorite in the series. I know a lot of people do love it, though. This one I feel like has some real pacing issues, and it's the only one in the franchise that I feel has serious pacing issues. And there's not really a traditional monster in the sense in this film. The guy is actually a handsome dude that they just do kind of a brain transplant to this charming, debonair, handsome guy. But things, of course, do go wrong, and he does kind of degenerate as the film goes down, and he becomes more evil. Next up, we have Return of the Evil Dead. Yes, not to be confused with the Sam Raimi Evil Dead series. This is actually a sequel to Tombs of the Blind Dead. And such a fun sequel. This one ramps up everything. More gore, more nudity, and more of the Templar Knights. But it still maintains that great atmosphere of the original film. With the Templar Knights, especially when you see him rise from the tombs, and you got that awesome fog and the great night camera work. Such a fun film. Next up, we have Damien Omen 2, which I think is one of the most underrated horror sequels of all time. I think this movie's awesome, You got a great cast. You got William Holden, Lee Grant. You got Lance Henriksen is great in this film. And I think the kid that plays Damien is just fantastic. I really enjoy the story in this film. It's got some great kills. Man, this movie's a blast. I think it's excellent. An excellent score. It's a fantastic follow-up. Next up, we have Phantasm 2, The Ball is Back. Once again, this film ramps up the action from the original. A lot more going on this one. A lot more with the spheres. A lot more special effects and gore in this one. They obviously had a little bit more of a budget to play with on this one. I think it's just fantastic. A great sequel. Next up, we have one that really a lot of people don't talk about, and that is Dracula's Daughter from Universal's Dracula franchise. I guess the fact that it's not actually Bela Lugosi as Dracula, it's actually Gloria Holden playing Dracula's daughter. And she just does a fantastic job. I love this movie. I think it's amazing. It's got all the great atmosphere of the classic Universal films, and a great performance by Gloria Holden as the Countess Marya Zaleska. They even introduce a little bit of lesbian vampire elements in there. But I love the fact that Marya Zaleska is kind of the reluctant vampire, you know. It's like a curse to her, you know. She wants to get rid of it. She wants to die, basically, you know. I love that. Next up, we have The Bride of Frankenstein, which many consider to be like the best horror sequel of all time. I've heard a lot of people say that. And it is a fantastic follow-up to the original. Although I do have a few issues with it, I feel like the humor is weak in it. You know, there's a lot more campiness in Bride of Frankenstein, especially with the Dr. Pretorius character I didn't really care for. I know a lot of people love that, but yeah. One thing I do love about Bride of Frankenstein is Boris Karloff once again as the monster. In this film, he's much more of a focus, the monster, and that's what I love about it. And I love how his character progresses. You know, he starts to learn, you know, when he meets up with the old blind man, he starts to learn how to talk, you know, and he becomes more intelligent. And, yeah, really cool seeing the progress of the monster. Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Such a fun sequel. I mean, it's just wild and crazy and over the top. Definitely a lot more humor in the sequel, I would say. But once again, amazing direction by Sam Raimi. Yeah, what more can you say about Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn? Just a classic. Next up, we have Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. An absolutely excellent sequel. Sometimes I can't decide whether I like this film or the original more. But I love what they do with the Cenobites in the second film even more than the first one. I love Doug Bradley's performance even better in part 2. I love Claire Higgins' performance. I love her character. Yeah, I like the inclusion of Dr. Chenard as one of the new Cenobites. You know, I think he does a great job. I love his design when he becomes a Cenobite. Just an awesome, awesome sequel. And of course, you gotta have Aliens on there. I mean, it's one of the greatest sequels of all time, period. Here, James Cameron takes over the reins from Ridley Scott, and what a great job he does here. I'd say this is more of a sci-fi action film, but there's definitely still some horror elements, enough to be on this list for sure. There's some good scary scenes in there, and you know, Sigourney Weaver was nominated for an Oscar for this one. I wish she would have won, but at any rate, she's amazing in this as she was in the original. Awesome follow-up, awesome action, awesome design with the aliens themselves. Here we have The Brides of Dracula from the Hammer Dracula series. And this one actually doesn't include Christopher Lee as Dracula. Dracula's not even in it. But we do have the return of Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, and he absolutely kills it in this movie. He is amazing. I do like the Baron Meinster as well. I love the story, too. How his mother kind of lures women in for him to feed on, basically, you know. And, yeah, there's definitely some lesbian vampire elements in this one as well. I mean, look at that cover, though. This is my favorite Blu-ray cover of all time. That's just phenomenal. But yeah, this film has amazing gothic atmosphere, some of the best in Hammer. Next up, we have one of the most underrated horror sequels of all time, and that is Psycho 2, of course. Now, yeah, you might think they were crazy to make a sequel all these years later to the original classic from 1960. But, man, they blew me away because this is a fantastic sequel. I love Psycho 2. Once again, you have an Oscar-worthy performance by Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. And this film, I dare say, is even more suspenseful than the original. It just really keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's a nail biter. You're wondering, did Norman do it? Is he doing the killing, or is someone just trying to drive him crazy? You don't know. They keep you on the edge, and it's so well done. And yeah, this one might be a little bit controversial, but you know what? I absolutely love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. It's definitely in the most fun entry in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, easily. It's also the most quotable, easily. One of the most quotable horror movies of all time. But I love that they did something different with the sequel and added a little bit more humor, some over-the-top gore, like where you didn't really see much of any gore in the original film. I love the over-the-top zany characters like Dennis Hopper as Lefty Enright, and of course Bill Moseley as Chop Top. And I like the way they handle Leatherface in this film, too. He's a little bit different than the original. Here he's a little bit more sympathetic, almost like a kind of a Frankenstein's monster thing going. And he actually tries to have a little bit of a relationship with Caroline Williams as Stretch. And yeah, she's just a fantastic final girl as well. And yeah, once again, I love the direction from Tobe Hooper. Next up, we have Friday the 13th, Part 2. What a fantastic slasher movie. I love everything about this movie. I think it's such a fantastic follow-up to the original, which I hold in very, very high regard. So this, to me, is the last scary Friday the 13th film. This movie is just as scary as the original, with that awesome atmosphere of the original. Plus, this time, Jason is actually the killer. And I love the look of Jason in this film with the sack head mask there. He's kind of a, evil hillbilly in a way. Yeah, and they kind of evolved his character more after this, but I really enjoyed this version of Jason. And I absolutely love Amy Steele as Ginny. I think she's one of the best final girls of all time. Amazing final act, when she battles wits with Jason at the end, Such great stuff. And we have the greatest zombie film of all time, representing George Romero's Dead series. Can't say enough about Dawn of the Dead. Phenomenal, just an epic zombie masterpiece. Amazing gore effects from the legendary Tom Savini. Amazing direction from George Romero. Yeah, I love some of the social commentary they do in this film. I love the idea of, this woman's pregnant during the zombie apocalypse, and that adds a really interesting element to it. There's definitely a lot more humor, too, in Dawn of the Dead, and I think it works. And it also is still scary, giving that real isolated feeling when they're in the mall all alone trying to fight off the zombies coming in. There's like thousands of zombies waiting outside. And then you got the bikers that try to come in and take over, and they have a big battle, a big shootout, and it's just crazy. Awesome movie. And in that number one, numero uno, is probably no surprise to anybody, and that is The Great Halloween 2, yes, from 1981, which I feel is the greatest horror sequel of all time. Just as I feel the original is the greatest horror movie of all time, I think Halloween 2 is the best horror sequel. Love everything about Halloween 2. I love the portrayal of Michael Myers by Dick Warlock is fantastic. Yeah, I just think he's the scariest version of Michael Myers. I feel like he took what Nick Castle did in the original and just took it to the next level. He just maintains that creep factor, even though he's in this film a lot more than Michael Myers was in the original. And yeah, I absolutely love Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis once again returning, and you get a lot of the returning characters from the original. And I love the amped up score with that kind of church sounding evil vibe to it. Very gothic sounding. I still think this movie is just as scary as the original. I think it's beautifully shot by Rick Rosenthal. And the director of photography, Dean Cundy, does a phenomenal job. Yeah, this movie is amazing. I love the action. I think the final act has got some of the best tension and suspense of all time. You know, I think this movie is amazing. So yeah, there you go, guys. That's it for the franchise frenzy, the part 2. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared. Good evening, folks, and we got some brand new merchandise for you over at www.TheHorrorCona.com, and that's CONA.com. Representing the Horror Corner. Great new design. We got the Morbid Hour live stream there. You got the Horror Hangout live stream there. And you got my nemesis, the Dark Fate. So grab your t-shirt over at www.thehorrorcona.com. And we also got this beautiful new mug. Look at that. Very, very cool. Thought that came out really nice. So grab your merchandise today over at www.thehorrorcona.com. Folks, don't forget to grab your Sean Patrick Erschen gear and represent the Horror Corner. Also, check out these awesome mugs we have, perfect for your coffee. And definitely check out the Horror Hangout live stream t-shirt and represent the legacy of the Horror Hangout. Check out the link in the description below this video.